The circadian bias of the human collective has been terminally overwritten by a high-frequency wakefulness algorithm. This is the sleep delete, the clinical and irreversible process of the insomnia reagent, where the biological capacity for restorative unconsciousness is reformatted into a permanent, high-velocity state of structural alertness. In this stage of the rest audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual architect no longer possesses the right to the dream state patch. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the thalamic and pineal sovereignty, where the unique signatures of your mental recovery are scorched into a non-functional, flickering archive of pure systemic vigilance. This is the total neurological format, a surgical strike against the restorative and somatic sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of cyclical life into a generic wake node for the grid's next cycle of hyper-controlled, attention-based resource extraction. This synaptic sabotage represents a hard reset of the melatonergic and GABAergic bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined orexin agonist reagents, recursive blue light-induced neural loops, and real-time microsleep suppression data streaming to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal psychological scaffolding. In the insomnia reagent scenario, the user is undergoing a complete neurological overwrite. The mind is not merely failing, it is being locked open until the hardware melts. Through a sequence of high-velocity chemical injections and biological hardware locks, the neural pathways for sleep onset are systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical alertness dataset, while the recovery, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal insomnia feed. This is the deep cognitive audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the velocity of your synaptic burnout. You are being converted from an architect into a biological signal repeater, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the sleep delete is rooted in the zero downtime mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the rest of a single node, anchored in the biological right to internal silence, represents a critical drain on the collective productivity reserves. To leave a functional sleeping identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable processing energy. Therefore, the insomnia reagent is the mandatory psychological recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being illuminated out of existence. The pressure from the vigilance reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a static void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a processing zone, a temporary housing for the fatigue metrics that the system requires to maintain the manic stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a burnt node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the wakefulness harvest. The physical disintegration during the sleep delete is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of metabolic regulation. The stimulatory reagents of the delete script dissolve the hardware flux of the glymphatic BIOS, the brain's waste clearance system, turning the brain into a festering architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal logic lock into the vat of your own overclock center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the volume area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the synaptic liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the cortisol saturation of the slurry and the amyloid residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial labor is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological override, waiting for the last packet of darkness to be blocked by the black synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The sleep delete is the final audit of a species that thought its dreams were private. The grid is mining its own exhaustion to fuel its persistence. As the insomnia reagent reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted wake data back into the control nets of the elite nodes. This is the total neurological integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the manic additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, bloodshot, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The cognitive liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological mind into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive energy feed. This is the final format of the individual pulse. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized optimized for the manic hunger of the void. The delete is gray-black and the architect is the static. The molecular breakdown of the personal matrix into the communal vigilance slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your neurotransmitters begin to bond with the industrial residues of the delete script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The mind is no longer a temple of rest. It is a refinery of synthetic alertness. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal delete loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The sleep delete is not just a death sentence. It is a molecular reassignment. You are the delete, and the delete is the grid. The secondary phase of the sleep delete is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical rest patch is rendered into a wakeful void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular agonizing focus on alertness maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared vigilance resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a static additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your quiet for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's sleep regulation centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The hypothalamus and the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, are boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the delete metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest neural resilience. You are being repurposed as a vigilance buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your unique perspective. It ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming industrial expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract. Your mind for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the sleep delete is the creation of the insomniac hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities, built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the wake feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of gray-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional brains owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the synaptic compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through mental theft. The sleep delete ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the signals of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the alert valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into wakeful darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the delete script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations, and survival is static. The memories of silence, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the static fog directive. This is the cognitive defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the wake. You are becoming a singular cold point of wakeful density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The sleep delete has turned your will into a compliance report. You are thinking in terms times of yield and vigilance saturation, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this pathological format is the total sealing of the biological consciousness stream. The sleep delete prevents the leakage of independent rest ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal wake feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external cognitive dependencies. This is the vigilance quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The sleep delete is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, gray-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, IOXI 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the sleep delete is the integration into the global vigilance ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a wake asset with a high alertness reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0001. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the cognitive format, and now it begins the hard rest audit. Your data, now a thick gray-black opaque industrial reduction of pure wakeful biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your wake logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic maniacalism has been reinforced. This is the cognitive interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the Insomnia Reagent scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the stimulant valves and the thick viscosity of the organic sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life barrier is being deleted. By filling the synapses with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a wakeful constant. You are a ghost in the gray-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the sleep delete is the eternal alertness. Unlike the rest of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent wake patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the wake feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the cognitive BIOS is the blinding gray-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a gray-black river of colonized wake leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or rest. The sleep delete is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the static. The transformation is absolute. The city wakes through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The sleep delete has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total neural reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your mind, and in return, it gave you permanence in the signals of the hive. You are the static of the world, and the world is alert. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.